Good morning, everybody. If you're all thinking the picture on the right-hand side is mine, that's not true, and I have a lot more gray hair than this gentleman. That's just a representation of some of the focus that we are having in Dell from millennials. Okay, what I'm going to do in the next 35 minutes, I'll quickly introduce Dell Technologies, a family of businesses, and then I'll quickly highlight our journey within Dell in terms of how we've been doing the Dell IT transformation as well as the digital transformation, and also how we are observing these transformations for our clients as we serve almost 98% of Fortune 500 companies. And then I'll deep dive into the DevOps, and I'll share how our journey has been, and then I'll wrap it up in terms of our learnings and best practices, and then we follow up that with any other questions. So with that, moving on, I hope this slide is showing on the screen now. So Dell Technologies is a family of businesses, which is a privately held company with about $72 billion revenue. Like I said, we serve about 98% of the Fortune 500 companies in the world. We are a 145,000 team members company. And out of that, we have about 30,000 full-time customer service and support team members that we have to serve our customers and to support our customers. And we operate in about 180 countries. Just to give a quick recap on the 7 brands that we have in the Dell Technologies family. The Dell EMC, as you can recall, we had a large acquisition last year, about $67 billion. As a result of that, our family has grown. So Dell EMC provides all the solutions that work out of the data center, as well as we provide the client solutions that works outside the data center. And we have a Pivotal. Pivotal is a pioneer in terms of providing the platform as a service, in terms of providing the platform to do cloud native kind of applications. RSA, you are all very much familiar. RSA is into security, and RSA provides an end-to-end glue in terms of securing each and every interaction that we have from the customer's point of view. And then we have SecureWorks, which provides services in terms of how to protect our customers from threats and various other risks. And then, of course, VirtuStream is another company which provides the services on cloud-based environments, and meter services on cloud-based environment. And of course, VMware you're all familiar with, so that's a pioneer in terms of providing the software in terms of virtualization and cloud, whether it's public cloud or private cloud. So that's a quick introduction about Dell Technologies. Moving on to the next slide. This is all about IT transformation meeting the digital transformation. So if you really look at roughly around 2000 onwards, we as a Dell as a company, we've been engaged on IT transformation journey. And from 2015 onwards, we started on a digital transformation journey ourselves. And that's more or less the same representation of many of our large enterprise customers who have been in this journey. So can you all hear me okay? I'll try to be a little bit louder. So in the IT transformation journey, what we have really done is, this is really all about how do you transform your infrastructure, right? So you have data centers with physical servers, and how do you move to VMs and optimize the cost? And then the next wave that we've done in there is, hey, how do we move into private cloud within the data center and then further optimize it? That's from an infrastructure standpoint of view. In terms of an application standpoint of view, you have a wide variety of applications. So how do you transform those applications? How do you reduce the number of applications and make them more of a global application as opposed to regional applications? So that's another transformation journey that we went through, reducing applications from thousands into a few hundreds. And the third tenet that we did in terms of IT transformation is more about how do we provide, using economies of scale, how do you provide a global workforce in terms of providing this IT transformation journey so that it's optimal. Because these are some of the things that we did as per the IT transformation. And then with this digital transformation world, as we saw the world moving more towards cloud and mobility and few other means, and that's where we started this journey of the digital transformation. We'll highlight a little bit details later. In terms of at a gist, we are trying to treat our 130 odd employees in our company as our customers internally, and then how do we provide them an experience that they would otherwise get in the current internet age, right? Whether it's providing a mobile-based experiences, providing the BYOD experiences, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the kind of a journey that we are in. And this digital transformation is very key in terms of our context of the DevOps, because that's where the need for DevOps is more and more stressed. So moving on to quickly giving you a view on what kind of workloads that we have in our environment. Look at the traditional. You have the system of record kind of applications, whether it is Oracle apps kind of world or SAP of the world, and then several custom build applications running on different platforms, right? So that's one set of it. And then when you move to a cloud native kind of world, that's where our digital transformation is predominantly on. And you are running on top of a platform as a service layer, abstracting your infrastructure underneath, and we heavily use a Pivotal Cloud Foundry. And then there are several other representative workloads that we mentioned here. If it is a RabbitMQ from a synchronous communication standpoint of view, or Cassandra from a NoSQL standpoint of view, and so on, right? So moving on to the next one. What kind of infrastructure strategy that we'll have to put in place to support both the traditional apps as well as cloud native apps? So traditional apps, like I said before, we have migrated more or less into either running on a VM environment or running on a private cloud environment. And then all these new digital transformation applications that we're developing, so we are developing on cloud native apps and on top of the PaaS layer, predominantly leveraging a microservices architecture. And then underneath the infrastructure can be changed, whether it is a private cloud or a public cloud or even combination of both, right? So that's a quick infrastructure snapshot. And within Dell IT, we focus on, apart from the IT transformation, digital transformation, we heavily focus on the workforce transformation and the security transformation. So I'll quickly touch base on workforce transformation. So like I mentioned earlier, all the 130,000 employees that we have in Dell, so we are trying to provide an experience which will excite them, it improve the productivity, and so that this can be showcased for our customers as well, because that's where we are actually heading. And then security, in the past, the security was looked as a more of a siloed approach, and now we're looking at more of an end-to-end approach on how do you secure all the transactions, all the interactions, right from the workforce and clients to all the way to your service, right? So that's another area that we are heavily looking at. So now jumping on to the DevOps, I just want to take a quick minute to kind of introduce, I'm sure many of you are aware of, it may be a refresher for you. Before the DevOps momentum started, it was around 2009 is when this momentum was started. We had like development teams, or software engineering teams, or QA teams, and operations teams like infrastructure, support, and release management. So they were working in a more like a independent departments. And then there was a need for better collaboration between these teams so that you can improve your ability to integrate the software, test the software, and deliver the software faster, right? That's what created that intersection of the DevOps. And now, if you see in the current environment, you don't see a lot of departmental kind of an approach, right? So, for example, the QA is already folded into the software engineering team alongside the developers. And then some parts of operations also kind of moved into here, and then there are certain operations are separate. So now, what is DevOps in terms of what are the different components of the DevOps, right? So one an important component of the DevOps is CICD. This CICD is more about how do you promote a continuous integration of the software as you develop it, and then how do you make sure that that integration process is error-free, right? And then the next one is once you prove that your integration process is successful, your builds are ready, how do you seamlessly deploy them into a heterogeneous infrastructure environment that you have in typically any enterprise? So that's the CI/CD. We'll do a little bit more about the CI/CD. And the other aspects of the DevOps which are important is that there was a transformation from the waterfall world to the agile world. In order to accelerate that transformation, DevOps playing a key role in terms of making agile-based teams work more collaboratively and make these releases much faster. So, for example, agile environment in combination with the DevOps, it will give you an opportunity to fail fast and learn fast, and then make those corrections quickly so that you don't need to wait for several months to get a feedback from the customer in terms of whether it works or not, right? So the other aspect of DevOps environment is TDD, test-driven development. If you want to kind of promote more of a test-driven development, which is one of the key attributes of Agile, and you need a strong DevOps to support it. Otherwise, you will not be able to do a test-driven development, right? And another aspect of the DevOps is once you have your builds ready, what's your ability to create a dynamic test environments or test beds and create them at will and then test them and then you destroy them. Like, for example, if you're running a nightly build. So you don't want it to depend on any of the static test environments, right? You can create the dynamic test environment and complete all your regression tests and then you can destroy it. So that's a very essential part of the DevOps. Last but not least, by having this DevOps maturity working in an agile fashion, you are providing a better developer experience. And I'll dwell a little bit about developer experience here. So today, if you really look at it, you have to treat your developers more or less like how you treat your customers, in the sense that you provide them a better experience in terms of how efficiently they can design, develop, integrate, and test and deploy the software so that their productivity is directed towards delivering the business critical features as opposed to doing a lot of plumbing and filling the forms, right? So that's where, if you really look at it, we are driving another initiative internally called developer experience, and that we measure that, and DevOps plays a key role on it. Moving on to the next slide. It's just a refresher again. If you're thinking about an environment, mostly all the digital transformation world, you're creating a new set of applications to serve your newer customers, newer millennials, and newer user stories. From the time you get an idea in terms of moving into production, you got to have some kind of an agile environment and a DevOps environment to realize that, right? So you have a business who have an idea, and the product managers have an idea, and then they quickly work with the development team to create a minimum viable product and work with the operations team in terms of going through the DevOps process and deploying into production and get a quick feedback and then pass on that feedback and you iterate and quickly and then ship the product quickly, right? That's the real essence of the combination of Agile development and DevOps. And then I just want to kind of spend a little bit more time here. Like I said, the CICD is a key component of the DevOps, continuous integration and continuous delivery. So what are the benefits of this, right? So by implementing this CI/CD and efficient DevOps process, you're going to deliver high quality software much faster, and it's continuous process. And basically, to take the idea to production is really quick. So that's the real essence of it. Now, what are the different components of a CI/CD environment? So I want to give an analogy of, think about a factory. I'm very familiar with the Dell factory. So let me take an example of a Dell factory. So in a Dell factory, you would have a line, a manufacturing line, manufacturing our servers, manufacturing our storage, manufacturing our network devices, a separate one manufacturing our laptops. So think about that as an enterprise. You have different kinds of software application ecosystem. There is a marketing application ecosystem. There is a sales application ecosystem, and then there is order management. There is a supply chain planning. There is a manufacturing, and then there is logistics, and then there is a support organization. So likewise, you have ecosystems. In our factory, we have different lines. So you have to design your continuous integration and continuous delivery pipelines very similar to those manufacturing lines in the factory. So when you design them, and within a line, you can have a sublines in terms of, hey, there's a process to pick the parts, and then there's a process to assemble the parts, and then there is a quality check and so on, right? So likewise, within your ecosystem of applications, you have, within marketing, you may have different type of set of applications. So they can have a sub CI/CD pipeline. So it's very important that we design the CI/CD pipelines, keeping the big picture in mind to derive the better benefits. I'll talk about that a little bit later in our lessons learned. So that's the big picture I want to give you in terms of what's the importance of the CI/CD pipelines here. And then I zoomed in here. A typical pipeline would have a stage where you have a source code control. You do source code check-ins, and you commit the code changes, and you have all the branches and merging and all that fun stuff. So once you're ready, okay. Apologies, folks. I think the connection got disconnected, so I'll just restart the conversation. So basically, I was explaining in terms of how do you commit the code, and then from there, how do you build, and how do you run all your static tests, and then unit tests and so on. And then once the build is verified, then how do you check it into the repository? And then from there, you talk about in terms of how do you deploy them into the real environment, which is very similar to your production, to run a few more tests before you deploy into the production. So that's where your real environment will come in, whether you're using a private cloud or public cloud, or you're just using a which is abstracting everything. So that's what we talk about. Again, there are different kind of tool sets available in the market. If you really look at our journey in Dell, so we started using Microsoft Team Foundation Server for our ALM activities, including repository for source code. And then we started migrating to GitHub in some situations where it made sense. So you could actually choose whichever one makes sense for your environment. And then of late, we started working with GitLab, which is another offering that we work with. So those are the choices that you can make as far as the version control is concerned. The automate build and test. Again, we started with Microsoft TFS-based builds and deployment capabilities, and then we saw some constraints, and then we migrated to Jenkins-based environments for Java-based kind of environments, and for .NET kind of environments, we use TeamCity for CI activities, build activities, and then for deployment purpose, we use Octopus. And then now we are moving towards consolidating that around CloudBees. CloudBees is a company which promotes the Jenkins. So that's our experience. It's been so far as far as the build and deployment is concerned. As far as choosing a tool for your, how do you create a repository of those binaries is concerned. So Artifactory is an open source tool, and there's a company called JFrog which is supporting it right now. So that's been widely used, and our experience is great on that. And then coming to infrastructure. So like I said, we started with the physical servers and then moved to the VMs. And we used VMware products there, and then we moved to a private cloud, and we used VMware products there as well. And now we are using Pivotal Cloud Foundry, working on top of it and abstracting it, because there are some situations where we are even doing some bursting into the public clouds as well. So that's about different kind of tools that we can use here to automate the CI/CD pipeline. And from an agile project management standpoint of view, so we use Pivotal Tracker. So that has been a really good experience for us. And then, of course, we have our other partner on the webinar who will share some details. They have some offerings as well in this space. Again, it's left to you as an organization in terms of shortlisting some of these tools which fits for your environment, and then start using them. So that's the essence of the CI/CD builds. And then I'm going to kind of focus more my attention on what kind of business benefits that we derived out of this journey, right? So the first and foremost is speed or time to market. And we had situations where when we were using waterfall methods, we had release cycles. The minimum was 3 months release cycles. But in some situations, it used to take 6 months as well, right? So when we looks like my voice is breaking. I hope this is better. Now I'm just talking very close. So release cycle time reduction is the biggest win here. So we moved from 6 months, 3 months type of release cycles to more of a fortnightly, weekly, in some cases daily type of time cycles, right? So that's the biggest benefit of this. Of course, the journey has been slow and steady, because that had to do with how fast we were able to transform our teams and processes from waterfall to a more of an agile based. That's about speed and the quality. I can tell you, when we were in a waterfall kind of environment, few weeks before the release used to be chaotic, because that's when the UAT starts, user acceptance test, and they log few defects. Sometimes it could be a major functional gap, and we had to really scramble to get that in place. As you all know, it's not that easy to get a feature as simple as fixing a defect, right? So that was the biggest win in terms of improving the quality up front, especially implementing the test-driven development. The second thing is, when you break the scope into a smaller chunks, your chance of getting a better quality, better tested is very high. And also, as you give more demos at the end of every sprint, so your chance of getting the features right is very high. So that's our journey in terms of the quality. you can always think like, hey, if you run faster, are you not compromising on the quality? I mean, that's a fair question, but when you do it in more sprints and more iterative fashion using DevOps as a method, then you are actually discovering those defects much earlier than pushing them into production. So the next biggest advantage that we got is a business uptime. So when we were using an environment where it was waterfall and there was no quick turnaround. So when we launch something and when we find an issue in the production, our ability to turn around quickly as a patch was limited because of our processes and our speed was not tuned to it. And now with this environment, the moment you identify the defect, within a very short period of time, in a few hours, we can turn around that, right? That's one big benefit. And another benefit is that we slowly achieved a zero downtime type of environment. I mean, we always had a zero downtime for some of our environments, like our Dell.com and e-commerce environment. But other areas, we were able to achieve much easier in terms of following the zero downtime kind of environments using, much efficient Agile and DevOps best practices. So that's about uptime, zero downtime, and faster mean time to recover. And last but not least, developer experience has been significant. So with this maturity, we are able to hire and retain best developers. As you all know, it's so difficult to hire and retain very good developers in the current environment, especially the kind of entrepreneurial energy that is happening. And of course, with this, the productivity of the developers has been so good, so they don't need to waste their time on any of the plumbing-related work, and they can just keep focusing on working on the user stories and getting as much work completed to meet the definition of done in the sprint. So that's the other advantage. And I'll focus a little bit more in this area, which is our learnings out of the whole exercise. Some of the best practices, right? So if you are intending to invest on DevOps, I think you should time it along with Agile transformation to derive the maximum benefits, right? So I'm not saying that you don't have Agile environment. Can I start DevOps? Yes, you can. You can get a marginal benefit, but the fullest benefits can be achieved when they are done together. So that's one. The second one, like I said before, if somebody is starting their journey, they might actually start it in some small teams environment and then roll it up into a bigger scheme of things. But it's better to design your factory and different lines in the factory and different sublines in the factory as a CICD pipelines, and then you start implementing those sublines and lines so that it will give you a much better benefit. So the third one is give flexibility to teams, especially the ecosystem application teams, to choose DevOps tools. Of course, you can't give them a freedom of choosing anything. You have to pre-screen some in the organization, and then you give them the flexibility. There could be application stacks running on Java. They may need some separate set of tools versus the teams working on the .NET and so on, right? So that's the another best practice, and we made some mistakes in that front. I'll talk about that later. Leverage container technology to design your CI/CD infrastructure. And if you're not familiar with the container technology, so we moved in a maturity curve from physical servers to virtual machines, and now the set of virtual machines are working in a cloud environment. It could be a public and a private cloud. But there was a next invention that happened saying that, hey, why do you have to have a very heavyweight virtual machine, whether it's a Windows or Linux or any other flavors? why can't you have a cut down version of it and create a container? The best example is Docker, is one example. So and then run set of containers instead of VMs, and then they can also participate in your cloud environment. So our experience has been, we started with physical servers first, and then we started with VMs. They all work fine, but they waste your resources for if you're building a CI/CD form for a build and deployment activities. So instead, if you can create a container form, you can again make a choice. There are several containers available in the market. So it will be much more cheaper, much more efficient for building the CI/CD kind of infrastructure. Quickly, lessons. Centralizing dev teams was a mistake that we did. DevOps teams, not only the teams who support all these tools, but also actually doing this automation from a build scripts and deployment scripts and so on. And then we quickly learned that lesson, and we did decentralize, and we made individual applications to own their own scripts to be part of this, and we limited that central team to just screen the set of tools and then maintain the tools and infrastructure and the processes around it. So that was a lesson that we learned. Prescribing a single DevOps tool set, that's what we did initially, and that backfired. So then we kind of provided the flexibility with the menu. We haven't started initially with leveraging the dynamic test environments. I think later on we invested on it. That was much more efficient to run our nightly builds in a CI/CD environment. So if you are planning to invest afresh, so start with dynamic test environments as early. There are a few myths that I wanted to highlight. Of course, DevOps started more on the applications and service layer kind of a thing, but our experience has been we extended this to database as well, especially how do you automate your build and deployment process for the database scripts. It could be SQL scripts or PL SQL, depending upon the environment that you're using. So we have seen some good results on that front as well. Last but not least, DevOps has been heavily used in the custom applications, and we also leverage this for package applications, especially where there is a lot of database involved and also some kind of configurations involved for packages, and that's where build and deployment processes were customized for package applications, but mostly in the deployment space. That's pretty much it. Dheeraj?
Sure, Krishna. Thanks a lot. I think it was a wonderful presentation, and I'm sure the insights shared by you would be of significant importance to all of us. So thanks a lot. Really appreciate your support here. And yeah, I'll get back to you with a few questions. All right. So folks, moving on. I also have Raghu with me. So we, as I mentioned at the start of the presentation, we have Digite as one of our thought leadership partners, and as a thought leadership partner, it's important for us to sort of get their perspective on how do they see things, things in the market. So I'll quickly introduce Raghu, and maybe then he could probably throw some light. So I'm just starting with a quick introduction for Raghu. So Raghu is, as I mentioned, he's one of the senior VPs and head of business development at Digite. He has an experience of 25 years now, primarily in the US and India geography. So at Digite, he is predominantly responsible for BD activities for Middle East and Asia Pac regions. and he has a huge experience in other big IT companies like Infosys and HCL before he was one of the key members who started Digital, and he is an alumnus of IIT Delhi. So, without wasting much time, I'll probably pass on the baton to Raghu, and maybe he could also share some of his views on DevOps.
Hey, thanks, Dheeraj. Can you make this?
Yeah, I'm just doing it, Raghu. Could you share your screen now?
Yeah. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah, Raghu, we can hear you, and your presentation is on the screen.
You can also see my screen?
Yeah, we can. Yes.
Okay. So, hi everyone. Good morning to you, and thanks for joining. So, just to quickly recap, I think what Dheeraj mentioned at the beginning. So, we are a Silicon Valley-based company with presence globally, and we have products in the collaborative delivery management of software, where we help customers to manage their projects and programs in a global manner. So both from a project management, delivery management, and so on and so forth perspective. We have about 750 licenses that we've sold globally to about 150 global customers. So Dheeraj talked about these three products, Swift ALM, Swift Kanban, and Swift Sync in the earlier part of the presentation. And as solutions out of these products, we've also got solutions around DevOps, which we call as Swift DevOps, and also have it on scaled Agile framework called Swift Safe. So Dheeraj was mentioning about some of the challenges that we have seen, our customers face, and that is what I wanted to spend the next few minutes to talk about. As was evident in the last part of the presentation, I think the state of DevOps is very clearly where best of breed tools and tools that the teams are comfortable with in various parts of the value chain will get adopted. So one of the things that happens is you end up in a situation where there are multiple tools that are there in the entire value chain, and hence there's a need to define good processes, good governance, and orchestrate the entire thing both upstream and downstream. That becomes a fairly key requirement for good DevOps to work in the entire factory chain that you saw in the previous presentation. So that is one thing that has come out, not only in the customer discussions that we've had, also in some of the surveys and reports that have come out by eminent consultants and companies. We can't do much about the culture, of course, so the culture obviously has to change, and that is something that none of us have a lot of support except for the company that's actually deploying it. But what also becomes important is the fact that visibility of the entire value chain, both the upstream and downstream, becomes fairly important. And it is imperative that you then drive it through metrics and KPIs that are common across the entire value chain. Otherwise, there could be a situation where one part of the value chain has a different key measure, and the other part of the value chain doesn't measure it the same way. And then there is a diffusion of the overall productivity that you expect out of the entire DevOps situation. And you also want a situation where you get into a continuous improvement kind of a thing. It is never going to be a journey where you will go from A to Z in terms of maturity in just a few steps. It's going to be a continuous journey, and hence you want to measure what you have achieved and then set a target for yourself going forward. And this whole thing obviously depends on the fact as to how well you can integrate the entire value chain in terms of information flow and integrate it with the ability to drive it through some business imperative rules that become important for the particular organization. So the ability to orchestrate and trace the entire value chain through an integrated mechanism is what we end up doing in the Swift DevOps solution. This becomes extremely relevant, especially in the offshore and global GIC kind of situation, wherein there might be a situation where we don't have, unlike an in-house application, you might not have the visibility for the entire value chain for the work that is actually given to the particular GIC or to the particular entity that is globally distributed. And what we have seen is the gaps actually are in these areas. So if we are able to kind of orchestrate, build rules, be able to measure things and govern through a set of well-defined processes and metrics, that then allows the overall DevOps solution to become much more effective. So when you look at our solution in the DevOps area, that is essentially what we try and do. So we don't get into the actual integration and the CI and CD areas where there are enough tools which are available in the market, including the ones that were mentioned in the previous presentation. A lot of open source tools. I mean, you have the Jenkins and the Dockers and so on and so forth of the world, ants of the world available, apart from established tools as well. And what we try and do is orchestrate the entire solution through defining processes, KPIs, rules, and the ability to integrate the entire set of tools and value chain. So that's essentially what I wanted to mention, and this is kind of the partial list of our customers. I think we are coming to the end of the allotted time, so I wanted to hand it back to Dheeraj and ask him to continue. And if there are any questions, would be willing to take it up.
Sure, Raghu. Thanks a lot. I think a pretty useful slides there, and I think creates a lot of awareness. So I've been getting a lot of questions from the audience, and looking at the paucity of time, I would probably pick up a few. So I start with one of the most frequently asked questions there, and that is how are the global delivery centers? How can they measure, or what are the best ways to measure DevOps success of a DevOps initiative? And if you could highlight the key metrics, if at all there is. So maybe I'll start with Krishna, and then Raghu, please feel free to pitch in with your thoughts.
Yeah, thanks, Dheeraj. So basically, the metrics and measures that we laid out is basically, I'll go back to those 4 key towers that I talked about: speed, time to market, quality, business uptime, and developer experience. So these are the 4 towers that we tracked. Underneath, we have defined specific metrics and KPIs. Many of them were around the Agile best practices and so on and so forth. So again, the key is those 4 towers: speed or time to market, quality, business uptime, and developer experience. Raghu, would you like to add anything from your experience?
No, I think you've covered it. I mean, those are the big things that any DevOps initiative looks for. And as you rightly mentioned, there would be a lot of sub metrics and sub KPIs below that. But essentially, the whole objective of DevOps is to be able to make releases which are production worthy as quickly as possible, with highest amount of quality. So if that is the objective, then you can kind of break it down to the customer specific or the initiative specific metrics. But that's essentially what it is.
Dheeraj.
I'd be on mute.
Okay, am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So my question is, when companies start implementing DevOps, and it usually starts on a smaller scale and it expands to a much larger scale. So, what are some of the challenges in terms of cultural transformation, organizational changes, structural and operational? So, in your experience, what are some of those key challenges that you see while adopting DevOps?
Yeah, I'll start off and then Raghu
Sure.
can add quickly. So, like I said, we were in a waterfall and we started DevOps a little earlier than our Agile transformation in some situations, and in some situations they were all together. But we didn't see much of a traction until organization-wide mandate was created that hey, the entire organization is moving towards Agile and DevOps type of a situation. And then even our organization structure was reworked in terms of creating the feature teams. Feature team typically consists of a Scrum Master or a technical project manager, and then a product owner, and then you have a set of developers, and you have a set of software development test engineers, and they work as a one unit, typically in the range of 8 to 10 people. And then set of such feature teams will roll up as a product unit, and then several product units will form an ecosystem. Right? That's how we reworked our organization. And then we separated out some of the common COE functions like a release management and so on. So that was very key. Until that time, we couldn't get a lot of benefits and traction. Once we did that, I think we were able to complete the transformation very quickly.
Okay. Raghu, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to his thing, and I think in one of the slides he did allude to it. See, I mean, one of the key things that DevOps presupposes is that you have the ability to, produce high quality and continuous, testing ability, right? So one of the key things that you'll have to make sure in this entire journey is your ability to, have very good automation, test automation. And the fact that people have to be, very conscious about the quality of the code that you produce. I mean, if you look at some of the examples given of the, of the frequency at which, this gets deployed, I mean, these are extreme examples, obviously, but just to take the example of a Facebook or an Amazon, right, who are deploying it every, so many seconds or every so many minutes. That's tremendous, tremendous backward pressure onto testing. And so this whole aspect of DevOps will not work if your, testing automation is not very robust and, very complete. Number one. Number two, I think from a culture perspective, as developers, we always struggle with people viewing the test team as a separate team. The fact that people in the dev team have to start writing JUnits and writing their own test scenarios to at least do their part of the unit testing is extremely important. So that's a bit of a cultural change which does take some time. So just to illustrate this, in our own company, we have these multiple products. One product where we have a legacy code base, we've not been able to make that change very easily. It has taken us a lot of time to do that change culturally. While as in the other team, which started much later, and where from day one we kind of incorporated this culture of saying that, hey, I mean, the development team needs to do its own JUnits. I think the two journeys have been very, very different. So there is a cultural component to this entire thing as well, especially with the testing part of it becoming so key.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, cool. I think I have a few more questions, but maybe we could address those over an email, looking at we are already above time. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Krishna, Raghu, and everybody who joined in. It was a really wonderful session. And we hope to see you in another events, the series of events that we are doing. So thanks a lot for your time and support. Have a good day ahead.
Thank you, Dheeraj. Thank you all partners.
Thank you everyone for taking the time. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.